All right. Yeah, great to see the cameras on. Let me see if we can open that view up. There we go. And I will make co-host. Yeah, you can got the co-host set up. Perfect. Very much looking forward to this conversation. It was start of 2020 when I first was sent a lecture of Paul's by Cameron Aitken. Some of you may have come across Cameron Aitken. He sent me a lecture and he's like, you probably need to meet this man. You should check it out. And I listened to the lecture and then I listened to the lecture again. And then I listened to the lecture again. I probably listened to it 5 times, but the guy who sent it to me, Cam, didn't follow up after that with how I could have a conversation. So that was January 2020, pre-COVID. And I was in France. My children were having their first crying experience on the ski slopes. It wasn't until 6 months later that he reached out again and said, you should probably have a conversation with this man. And I was like, yeah, that was really good. That presentation that you sent me, sounds like a good idea. The world had changed significantly between the first message and the second message. And so we did the spiral dynamic, which some of you are familiar with the spiral. He sent me the test for the spiral, sent me the test for the genius typing, some of you are familiar with. And I took it quite lightly because I'd completed a lot of different personality typing assessments. But once I actually finally finished them and sent them to Paul and got on the call, I realized that Paul knew more about me than I knew about myself. And that was quite an interesting experience for someone who'd traveled the world and learnt languages and coached winning teams and built businesses. And then I was on a call with someone who understood me better than I understood myself. And so that was where the journey began. I knew at that time I needed to continue that relationship. I thought when I was speaking with Paul, he said there was going to be $15,000 a month to work together. And from the way that he was talking, it was like, well, kind of made sense, but it was also like, well, that's going to be a real stretch. I can maybe do 1 or 2 months, but that's going to put a lot of pressure on making some big changes real quick. I think I misheard, or I still don't know exactly what happened. But what did happen is we started working together one-to-one, and it was fantastic to have individual conversations, but I wanted to see the whole system laid out. I wanted to see presentations and get a bigger picture of how this man from Tasmania had come to have such a big understanding of man, of business. And I've still never met anyone like Paul. I don't see anyone on YouTube or anywhere that is able to express themselves and answer questions across such a broad range of topics and invoke change, deep change in people as well. So there are many mental paradigms and memes that Paul installed in me, ways of understanding the world that I value very highly now. And you realize all of the things that have been installed over your lifetime as you're going through that process. And so it's not necessarily an easy thing to go through and really study this. And some of you have experienced that. I'm going to see Josh there. Josh has gone as deep as anyone on this work. Lyndon's done a lot of work here. It's a challenging journey, but I'm very excited to say this is the start again of the next phase of taking on this education and taking on this way of thinking. It's a rare approach where you treat the art of business and the art of developing yourself as something very serious. It was very serious. You take it more seriously. You treat it as a profession. It was a big change for me to really step into business. I didn't really know what copywriting was before starting with Paul. Paul introduced me to the importance of copywriting. I'd been in business for 7 years, but that tells you about how seriously I'd taken business before I started working with Paul. And Paul does a very good job with copywriting. It's one of the key skills. But yeah, this journey has been extremely valuable for me. I also saw it deeply change men who I'd worked with for 3 or 4 or 5 years. And then they started the journey with Paul. and I saw the way that they look at themselves and the way they look at the world shift significantly for better. And so, yeah, today the journey begins again. The opportunity is a question and answer format today. So I want you to be thinking about what is it? What would you ask if you were on a call with someone who'd been very successful in business in multiple areas and understood the market psychology very well, also been very deep in human psychology and understanding people and tying those things together. But yeah, you'll realize that the more you listen, that the more there is to learn and ask. So well done, everyone jumping in here live today, and let's begin the journey. We've got 47 on the call, which is fantastic to see that there's a hunger for learning. Like, that's a beautiful thing in itself. We're all here to learn, to upgrade. Welcome, Mr. Council.
Hey, g'day. Let's start off with a show of hands. Who thinks that Keegan has just set me up to fail after that introductory speech? I can't go anywhere, can I, except down. What he didn't really tell you is that the $15,000 he talked about was what I actually paid him to say what he just said. So, full transparency here. So, great to see so many people. Great to see some familiar faces. Head of gumboot tossing, government of Vanuatu. Very, very good. I like these people with titles. So I'm really an open resource. There's lots of software programs that are open software. Well, just consider me a part of that. So, and if you can drag anything out of me, that's you're more than welcome to it. Okay, so I tend not to hold anything back. I tend to basically my job is to give, your job is to receive. And because I don't know you, and it'll take us a while to start to get that sort of rapport building. But my invitation to you is, if there is one thing that you would like to achieve that you actually haven't been able to achieve for yourself just yet, what would that one thing be? And begin asking your questions around that one thing, and we'll see where we go. So, make it important for you. And if you want to hog the whole 2-hour session, by all means, you just hog it. Don't worry about being shy and sitting back and this is everybody gets their fair share. No, it's basically first in, best dressed, which is always, and the others can take their cues from that. So my invitation to you is to basically ask something that's relevant to you that maybe that you haven't been able to solve, and we can actually start from there. So basically, it's over to you.
Right, well, I'll jump straight in, if that's okay.
Good on you, Alex.
Thank you, Paul. My big question I've got is, I was looking on your website, and you say something like, you truly started becoming rich when you believed you were rich. And that's something I'm trying and getting on with myself at the moment. And it's kind of a two-pronged question here. How, firstly, can someone who doesn't necessarily have lots of assets at the moment implement that well? And secondly, where does that come from? Is that a universal law?
I'm not exactly sure whether it's a universal law, but it might well be. if you think about the man-made universe, okay, now my apologies to the different forms of religions that we all share and the spirituality notion of creators. But if we just look at the man-made universe, so something that you can identify that human beings have made since human beings have been on the planet. Is that okay? Now, you can look anywhere in the man-made universe and you see all of these things that have come into existence. And so they all come into existence through the exact same process. We might call that process manifestation. We might call that process by a dozen other names without being too weird about it, without being too spooky about it, without anything. We might call that process downward causation, to use the language of some sort of neuroscientists. We might call it a dozen different things. But let's just start from the very basis. If we just go back, if we just look at the I might get myself in a bit of trouble here, but let's just look at a pyramid for a start. Now, I don't know who built the pyramids. I don't know whether they were supernatural beings or anything like that. But I'm just going to say, for example, let's say man made a pyramid. And if we can just start with that, then we'll be okay. If we can't agree on a pyramid, well, we're just going to pick something else. But let's say somebody wanted to build a pyramid. That pyramid had to appear in somebody's mind before it actually appeared in physical reality on the ground. Is that okay? So in other words, that pyramid had to be created in a mental reality before it could be created in a physical reality. So when you're talking about that, I truly became rich when I actually created it in my head, that's actually the first step. Because if I can't create it in my head, there is no way, apart from winning lotto or, winning the pools or something like that, but there is no way that it is going to appear in my physical reality. So it has to appear in your head first. Now, I'm guessing that everybody on this call is a high achiever in something that they're interested in. Whether it's music, whether it's performance, whether it's business, whether it's coaching, whether it's whatever it is, mathematics, You're all experts. And when I say an expert, you can get better because, you've got challenges to continue with so that you can continue growing. I see Sebastian's got what looks like a racing bike behind him. Well, look, next stop, Tour de France. Now, Sebastian might be away off the Tour de France, but if he doesn't actually put that into his brain first, he's not actually going to do the work to do the Tour de France, is there? So when I truly understood how everything in man-made universe comes as a thought form, an intuit, if you like, a thought form, and that thought form has to go into your head as an unconflicted thought form. Now, as soon as you get that thought form into your head in an unconflicted way, it's a done deal. You have just created a mental reality. And that mental reality is as real as anything that I can actually touch in the physical reality. It's just in a form that I can't directly observe. Would that be okay? But if I don't create it in my head, there's no way that it's going to actually appear before me in my physical reality. So the first step is to have an unconflicted view of what it is that you want. And if you have an unconflicted view of it, then you can impose your will on it, can't you? If you have a conflicted view, you'll be humming and hawing, which means you can't impose your will on it, which means what you want will defeat you rather than you defeat it. You think about the best sporting teams. You think about the best fighters. You think about the best musos. You think about the best of anything. The tennis players, the way to beat the other opponent is to actually impose your will on it. You think about weightlifters. The way to get the heaviest bar that, your personal best, is to impose your will on the bar or on the weight. Otherwise, it defeats you. So if you can't create that thing in your head, you can't actually do it. You don't do it by accident. So that's the first step. Does that make sense so far, Alex?
Yeah, that definitely does. Thank you.
Okay, now it has to be unconflicted. You can't turn the thought on one day and turn it off the next day. You can't turn the thought on one day and say, oh, I'm not worthy the next day. You can't turn the thought on. So it's like being in a room that only has one light switch and no windows. Either the light is going to be on or it's off. It can't actually be halfway. So if you turn the light on and never turn it off, the light is always there and the dark is never there. Okay, so if you turn that thought form off, that thought form is all there. And it's in a reality. It's a reality just as real as the physical reality. It's just that we can't see it yet. The next thing we've got to talk about is now the energy behind the transformation process of turning that thought reality into a physical reality. You just need energy, don't you? You need to do the work. You need to do the skill development of how do you cut a rock, how do you transport a rock, how do you stack a rock, and how do you, lift it up heights and all of that sort of stuff. That's just the physical work of the mental reality. Is that okay? So energy, we can call it emotion, we can call it any sort of thing. But if you can actually feel it as a reality, so your thought reality, and now you have a felt reality, if you can line those two things up without a conflict in any shape or form, because you don't have to rethink it. Once you've thought it, it's a done deal. You don't have to go and revisit it. You don't have to write it out 20 times. You don't have to say it in a mantra. You don't have to say it. Once it's in there, it's there until you change it, of course. Well, don't change it. Now, if you can get some bodily energy, if you can get some emotive energy, if you can get some motivation, if you can get some willpower, if you can get, it's all forms of energy. If you can actually feel it as though you are now living that reality, then physical reality has to catch up to it, because physical reality is the slowest of those three speeds. Thought reality is very quick. Emotional reality might take you a bit to build up. And physical reality, it's just like, if you plant a seed, if you plant a wheat seed, you know that it's got to spend, let's say, 20 days in the ground going through its process before it starts to sprout. And then once it starts to sprout, it's going to take 180 days before it's mature and ready to take. Okay, so everything after those two things is just now growing, and you're growing in physical reality. So, Alex, you become rich as soon as you think it into existence. There's no years, there's no buts, there's no ifs, there's no, but I don't know how. You don't have to. That's the work of it. Okay? But if you think it into existence, now there's just the work of it. If you think and emote it into existence, you've got the energy there. The energy is going to get you out of bed to do the work. The energy is going to make you do the work and not try and take shortcuts, etc., etc., etc. We call it a single track mind. Oh, great. We call it focus. Your brain, if you focus on it, your brain will actually produce these neurochemicals. One of them is acetylcholine, which actually improves your focus. And then if you get a sense of urgency, that'll produce another neurohormone called noradrenaline, which is going to give you much more energy to do the thing to do the work of the thing. And then the rest is just time. It's just maturation. We've got a gestation period, and then we've got a maturation period. Great question. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, that does. No, that's great.
and the rest is just the work. I can share with you, various steps along the way that you have to be skilled at, but that's you. That's just now the work. It's already a done deal in one reality, and just the work now makes it appear in another reality. And the big failing is people don't do the work. It's as simple as that, really. They just don't do the work.
Can I ask a follow-up on this?
Sure can.
Okay, so you're creating a mental reality of any sort. There's a precondition of actually knowing what you want, which is a personal struggle of mine.
Yep.
So even just a strategy for figuring out what you want is a big mystery for me. So any thoughts would be appreciated.
And what you say is actually true. If you don't know you want to build a pyramid, how are you going to bring it into existence? So, lots and lots and lots of people talk about goal setting and all of that sort of stuff. Well, what happens if you don't know what you want? So how do you set a goal? And that really depends on the type of personality that you have and whether you are an adventurous person or whether you're a secluded sort of take shelter type person. So if you don't know what you want, well, a sort of a more secluded, less adventurous person might wait for divine intervention. Is that okay? Now, again, that's a strategy. Not necessarily an effective strategy in my book, but it's a strategy. So if I don't know what I want and I'm not sort of going to sit around waiting for divine intervention, the only other way that I can actually find what I want is to actually go out and discover it. So the process that I use, because I hardly ever know what I want, and so I'm not one of these goal setters, trust me on that. But what I am is I'm an adventurer, and I will adventure forward on just about anything until I discover that it's the wrong pathway. But it's generally in that discovery process, then something appears out of nowhere, left field. That's a damn good idea. I think I'll become one of them. I think I'll do this. I think I'll learn this skill. Oh, that's a damn good idea. If somebody else has done it, therefore I know that I can do it. I'm not necessarily going to be the best at it, but if somebody else has done it, that means there's a trodden pathway. Well, then if they can do it, why can't I? And that's my philosophy. So I'm an adventure forward, and it doesn't matter whether I turn left turn, right turn. And in the adventuring forward, I know that I'm basically picking up all of these experiences that I'll be able to bring to the eventual thing that I want to go after. Whether it's a gold medal in something, whether it's a particular lifestyle, whether it's an acquisition of something, then once I've locked on, the process is fairly straightforward. Great question. So the more people you can, sorry, Mike.
That's right.
Yeah. So the more you can get round people who are adventuring forward, something will come out of left field, and then you'll know it when you see it. It's like if you've ever, gone around the home and something's happened, or you busted something, or you and you're looking around for something, and then somebody says, "Oh, can I help you find it?" And you can't name the tool, but you'll know it when you see it, because you know what it's you know what you want to use it for, and something, that'll work. And once you see that something, then you can name it. It's either a knife or a stick or a screwdriver or something like that. But because you can't name it yet, you've got to discover it. It's the same process. Sorry, Mike, go ahead.
Thanks, Paul. These are great questions so far. And again, to follow up on what you said.
No, Mike.
Yeah.
Let's get it right. Okay. They're great answers, right?
Okay.
The question's just prompts, all right?
Okay. All right.
Sorry.
You talked about the thought, having an unconflicted thought.
Yes.
Bruce Lipton talks about subconscious barriers to those thoughts, which I'm guessing are the same thing, conflicts. I think I'm aware of some of my conflicts to some of the stuff I want consciously, but I also think I'm not aware of some of them. Do you have a way to discover the conflicts for you? Some people have this rash, they want to do something but never follow through. Are we always aware of our conflicts? How do you discover your conflicts?
The answer is no, you're not always aware of them. How do you discover them? The answer is reasonably simple, but also completely complex, incredibly complex. The only time in, my world, it's not the only time, but we'll just make it the only time, that you can really discover your conflicts is when you're conscious. Now, if you've been listening to Bruce Lipton, he will say that the average person is conscious somewhere between 5% and 1% of the day, which means that they're unconscious somewhere between 95 and 99% of the day. Now, if Bruce Lipton is true, how the hell are you going to discover your conflicts if you're wandering through life in this unconscious state, believing that you're conscious, but you're not? Because most of what we do is just automatic habitual behavior.
Yeah.
Okay, so in order for you to discover something, you need to be conscious. Now, I'll ask you the question, how do you know that you're conscious in any given time of day?
Not sure I know.
Well, there's a challenge, isn't there?
Yeah. I know that I have been when I've done meditation, when I've those types of practices, mindfulness, heart math, meditation, stuff like that. I've generally been more aware, and I'm more aware of what's going on around me, and I'm not trapped as much in my own thought stream.
Yeah. So my question was, how do you know you're conscious at any given moment of the day? During a 10D10, I'm going to say that's an exercise of some description.
I guess for me, it's almost like I can step back and observe my thoughts.
And that may well be. I'll give you a shortcut.
Uh-huh.
Okay. You will know that you're conscious the minute that you can actually ask the question, am I conscious?
Okay. Am I conscious?
Yeah, you've got to be conscious to even ask the question, don't you?
Yeah.
So that might not necessarily work if you're being unconscious 95 to 99% of the day.
Yeah.
Okay? But you have to actually be conscious more times in the day to then be present to now the question that you want to ask is, how can I discover my challenges? Now, obviously, if you work with somebody who can, coach you and talk you through these processes, that's a really good process too. But if you're by yourself, then I'm going to encourage you to create what I call consciousness booby traps. Okay. Yeah. And you can create as many consciousness booby traps as you can think about throughout your environment on a daily basis. So when you get up and the first thing you do is you go to the fridge, then booby trap it so that a little note falls down when the door opens that says, are you conscious? And as soon as you see that note, you'll actually be conscious. Have your phone go off every half hour. And when you go to press the alarm button, there's a little note there that says, am I conscious? So any process that you can go through, any chance when you're driving the car, most of us drive our car unconsciously. We're listening to the music, we're thinking about a dozen different things, and we've got to rely on all of that muscle memory to swerve and react and do all those things. But am I conscious? Now, as soon as you say, oh, look, okay, am I conscious? And you say yes, now you can do some conscious work. If you've got a spare 5 minutes, if you've got a spare 10 minutes, you might call it mindfulness, you might call it something different. But now you can say, hey, I wonder what my limitations are. What do I keep bumping up against? Where's the breakdown for me? Like I have these good ideas. I sort of, go and start acting on some of these good ideas, but at some point there's a breakdown. Where's the breakdown? That'll actually tell you where the barrier is. Is the barrier other people? You don't want to separate yourself from other people because you're afraid of what they might think of you. You might have a real deep-seated need to position yourself for positive regard. So you try to please other people. You might say, oh, gee, if I change, if I become who I think I should become, or who I've got the potential to become, hey, look, I might lose contact with my brother or my sister or my best friend or your best friend's best friend or whatever, because, they'll say, oh, you used to be a real party boy, Mike, but now you've changed. You've been hanging around with these people far too long and we don't know you anymore. And so what you do is you shrink and you go back and belong because, there's all sorts of separation anxiety from breaking away from the herd. I don't know, but I'm just saying. So does that give us some clues, Mike?
That's really helpful, Paul. That's really helpful. Yeah. I'm starting listing a whole load of questions already or possible answers. Thank you.
Very good. And you can only write those because you're conscious.
Yeah.
But at some point, you're going to drift off into idea land and now not be present to this call.
Yeah.
You're going to drift off into possibility land. You're going to drift off into introspection, and you'll miss 15 minutes. That's okay. I'm not saying don't do it, but that's just it's the normal process.
Hey, Mike, I might have an example for you. We're currently doing this lean fast protocol, right? This diet. For me personally, I've gone to open the fridge and automatically almost grabbed some chocolate-coated peanuts and then realized what I was doing. And I've become aware and I've become conscious, and then I didn't do it. So in that moment, I kind of switched off autopilot and was completely present of what my decision was going to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
G'day, Alan. Nice to see you again.
How are you, Paul?
My question to you is, why are the chocolate peanuts in the fridge in the first place?
That's my pregnant partner.
Oh, yes, I see. You couldn't really see it all.
I've got a question for you.
Okay.
So you recommended a book during EMC called The Secret Life of Real Estate and Banking.
Yes.
Philip Anderson, great book so far.
Yes.
And I've been delving into a little bit of some of his YouTube interviews, and the weekend we did on trading, and there was not enough time to go into cycles, and now I'm reading up about the 18.5 year cycle and kind of figuring out where to place myself in terms of understanding the position I could be in. For instance, during EMC, I feel like we were coming to the top of that mid-year or the first 7 year cycle, and things were pumping, right? Bitcoin was going up, Theta was going up, everything was pumping. If I understood the cycle back then, I would have done things differently. And now we're approaching the end of or towards the end of the second 7 year cycle. I feel like I can position myself in a few things if it was trading or maybe selling some of my crypto towards the top of that cycle. I'm not asking for advice, of course, but it's just interesting to see what that cycle is, and looking back at the history of it, that it's not talked about so much. And you can read The Corruption of Economics, which I've kind of delved into a little bit, but it's fascinating that not more people talk about this that could potentially use it for financial benefit with their assets or their trading or their real estate. And I wanted to ask you what your thoughts are on the cycle, and if you've used it to your own advantage.
The last answer is always yes. You know, I was dead flat broke in 1994, and you know, 3.8 years later, my first 7 figures. That's cycle work. It's not my good looks, charm, and personality. Oh, nobody smiled. Sorry. That's all right. I'm Tasmanian. I need to be forgiven occasionally. The reason why it's not talked about is because very few people actually know about it and very few people actually understand it. Now, if you think about, you're born into a cultural system. And we've got people from all around the world here, and they're all born into the cultural system that they're actually born into. So some people are born into a cultural system in France, which is different to the cultural system in America, which is different to the cultural system in Zimbabwe, which is different than the cultural system in Holland. Is that okay for a start?
Yep.
Okay, so we're all born into our cultural systems. Now, what does the culture that you're born into want from you? It wants you to be a good example of that cultural system. And this is not right, wrong, good, bad, conspiracy theory or anything like that. It happens all around the world. It happens in all cultures. They want you to be a good example. So if you're born into the Kalahari Bushman Society, then you're going to learn how to be a good Kalahari Bushman. You're going to learn all of the skills that you need to do in order to be a good example of a Kalahari Bushman. Is that okay? If you're born into a Chinese system, you're going to learn how to be a good example. You're born into Russia, you're going to learn how to be a good example of whatever that cultural system. So it has benchmarks, it has standards, it has things. You can actually be anything you like, but they're not going to teach it to you because they want you to be a good example of this, whatever the this is. Is that okay so far? Now, we mostly are on this call have been born into an economic system as well, an economic culture as well. And chances are you're all from rather developed nations. I don't know where you're all from, but I'm guessing the majority are from developed nations which have got developed economies. And so let's call it a capitalist. Let's just take America, for example, and let's just call that a capitalist economy. Okay, so how does a capitalist economy work? Well, it just needs to keep on growing and growing and growing and growing and growing. So therefore, prices keep rising, rising, rising. Therefore, the economy keeps growing, growing, growing. And so those people that know to take advantage of that, gain advantage of that. But see, in order for an economy to grow, we need the majority of people as spenders. If the majority of people were savers, the economy wouldn't grow. So we need the majority of the people that are born into that culture to be a spender or a consumer of all of the money that they earn. And so in America, you're going to spend approximately 126% of every dollar that you earn over your lifetime. In Australia, you spend 116% of every dollar that you earn over your lifetime. Okay, so I don't want to teach you how to be one of the 3%, because that won't work. If everybody knew how to be one of the 3%, then the economy wouldn't grow, because we need the majority on the other side of the 97% who are the consumers. So I'm not going to teach you anything in this cultural thing that advantages you. I'm going to teach you everything that advantages the few. So I'm not going to teach you about economic cycles, because all you need to know is how to work, how to earn money, how to spend that money, and how to borrow more money to spend. That's all you need to know. And I, as the cultural tutor, will be happy with my results. As long as you're predictable, you're obedient, and you're a servitude, I've done my cultural teaching job. Because a good example of a capitalist is a person who spends, because that can make a few of us rich. Okay, so you're not going to learn anything outside get a mortgage. go into debt, get a credit card, go into debt, buy pay lay-day, go into debt, buy lay-by, get into debt, get into debt, get into debt, get into debt, get into debt. Spend all your money and then spend future money that you haven't earned yet. That's the only thing that you're going to learn. And then you'll do that obediently for the next 20, 30, 30, however many years until you retire. And then you've got no money left, so now you've got to take a pension or you're out on the street. Your choice. Okay, so that's why few people know about it. And now that you've read that book, well, now you know something about it. And so, okay, so now you've got to say, well, where are we? Well, we're actually not at the peak yet.
Yep.
And so before the peak is what they call the lemming phase, or the lemming phase. You know how like we've got this sort of cultural notion that lemmings, chase themselves all over the cliff. They don't actually do that in real life. They're not like that, okay? But anyway, we've got that sort of cultural image, and they call it the lemming phase. Everybody's been holding out because of whatever is happening in the economy, the uncertainty. We've got elections, we've got diseases, we've got all of these sorts of things. So they hold. Then all of a sudden the market starts to move, and then people become afraid that they're going to miss out. Well, we're about, 1 hour away from the boom. The crack up, on our clock. If we do a 12-hour clock, we're at 11 o'clock. So the lemming phase is, you might have heard this term, a crack up boom. Okay, so all the lemmings jump in, drives the markets to unrealistic highs, and then it just goes bust. We can see everything happening. We can see that 2007, 2008, we can go back to the noughties, we can go back to 1987, we can go back to 1975, same process. So we're not in that growth phase, we're in the phase before the crack up, which is the lemming phase. So you don't need to think about doing anything other than something that market forces will do the heavy lifting for. So you can either have one or not have one. That's the only thing that you can do. Okay, so some people talk about silver and gold and that stuff, but see, silver and gold are never going to make you rich because they're not an actual investment per se. They're more a hedge. They're more of an insurance policy. Insurance policies never make you rich, but they prevent you from having to buy the thing again. So if your house burns down, you don't have to buy your house again because you've got an insurance policy. If your car crashes, you don't have to buy your car again because you've got an insurance policy. Okay, so if you've got gold and silver, you don't have to make your money again because you've got insurance policy. So that's what gold and silver are. They're really insurance policies. So they'll go up only if the purchasing power of the dollar goes down. If the purchasing power of the dollar goes up, because they're priced in US dollars, if the purchasing power goes up, then the price of gold and silver will come down because it's just parity with the purchasing power. Now, eventually, the purchasing power will come down and the amount that you need to buy an ounce of gold is going to increase. But it's to do with purchasing power. It's not necessarily an investment per se, and it's not the right way to think about it. On the other hand, if you think about something like this, and I'm not telling you to do this, but I'm just saying, if you think about something like this, if you look at Bitcoin, it goes up and down just like anything else does. It goes up and down like Apple shares does, Amazon shares does, Microsoft shares does. It just goes up and down. That's just market forces, market noise, people jockeying for better positions and all that sort of stuff. So let's look at the last 10 years, or let's look at it from inception. The first transaction was for 0.0, this is 1 Bitcoin, was 0.00099 cents. The first Bitcoin was bought by 1/10 of 1 cent. Okay, that's 2009. 2000, and we're just, if you think about 2010, like the year after, if you had $1,000 in Bitcoin, if you bought $1,000 of Bitcoin, it'd be worth 35 million today. That's only 12 years. You name anything in the whole world that has gone up as fast and as far, anything. And yet, at the same time it's been going up to that amount, it's actually crashed 90% of its value 5 times. I think it's 5 times. It's never gone to zero, but it's crashed from its recent high, you know, from its previous high. And now it's like 60% off its high. And people think, oh God, you can't buy that. Well, why not? It's on discount. It's half price. Okay, if you just think about the last 10 years of just that Bitcoin, it's actually compounded its growth 78% every year annually in the last 10 years. 78% compound growth. So you tell me something that has grown faster than that anywhere in the history of the economic universe. And if you can identify something that's growing faster than that, I want to be on that horse. But if I can't identify anything that's growing faster than that, then I'm going to go on that horse, aren't I? Because it's the fastest horse. I don't have to worry about anything. The only thing I can do is have one or not have one. I can't do anything to it. I can't make it grow. I can't pour water on it and make it, you know, can't fertilize it. I can't do a thing. I can only have one or not have one. The rest is up to the marketplace. And history doesn't, you know, prove the future, but my golly gosh. It's only been around for, what is it now, 14 years.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Now, you don't have to go and buy a whole Bitcoin. Of course, you can buy $1 worth of Bitcoin, which is about 4,000 Satoshis. Why aren't you doing that every day?
Yeah, well, I mean, I dollar cost average weekly, but I guess my opinion a while ago was hodl for dear life. But now I'm like, well, if you can understand cycles, there's an opportunity there for you to sell. You're never going to pick the top, but you can make money on the way up and then buy back in at a later price. And I would never do that with something like property or anything. But, you know, that's something I'm trying to figure out what my plan is in this heat coming up.
So nobody who does that ever gets mega rich. Nobody. If one of the wealthiest, well, the wealthiest investor on planet Earth is Warren Buffett. He never sells. He might sell in order to buy, but he doesn't do that cycle stuff because he knows in the long term it's actually better to hold. I've never sold. I'll never sell. Yeah. Well, you know, not until I'm old and crotchety, which, you know, might be next year, but
yeah. Philip J. Anderson said
it's an hallucination to think that you can actually time a cycle. What you do with a cycle is understand it's like a seesaw, isn't it? When some things go down, other things are going to go up because they work counter-cyclical. So it's important to know what part of the cycle you're in to keep your eye on what will go up when everything comes down, when most things come down. That's the way that you take an advantage out of a cycle. When land comes down, you buy it when nobody wants to buy it. You buy it when everybody's a desperate seller. That's the time to buy it. It's not now that it's going up. You've already missed that boat. Wait for it to come down because it will come down. The same with any form of investment. A great company, it goes up and down. Buy it on the down and hold it. When it comes down again, buy some more until you actually need to cash in for your lifestyle needs.
Yeah, 100%. It makes sense. Yeah, but the cycle stuff's amazing. Definitely, I feel like since reading the book and looking into Philip J. Anderson, you can kind of mute the news way easier and not be so emotional based on what influencers are saying. Like, it definitely gives you a little more confidence, I think.
Influencers are there to influence. They're to sell you their version of the world. Now, they didn't get rich because they worked out, you know, the weirds and the wonderfuls and the ups and downs of money. They got rich because they have influence. And then somebody gave them the money to be more influencer. And then they gave them more money to be more influential. Okay. Listen to rich people. They're generally not influencers. Unless your name's Elon Musk or something like that. But he doesn't, you know, hold himself out to be an influencer. So, you know, it's not what they say, it's what they do.
Thanks, Paul. Epic chat.
You're more than welcome.
Good to see you again.
Yeah, great.
Hey, Paul, I have a question.
Go for it.
Hi, my name's Carlo. I don't think we've met either, so just introduce myself. I've got something that I've sort of been puzzled with lately, and while you're talking, I really broke it down to really what it was, and it came to 3 parts. Well, you mentioned that you need to create the mental reality before you create the physical reality, and
Yes.
the fundamental of that is that you arrive at a decision to make that mental reality a mental reality before it becomes a physical reality. So my first question is, what skills are required to arrive at a decision in that sense, where if you're going, well, I've decided that I'm going to be rich, I'm going to behave like I'm rich and things like that. So a lot of the time we have all this doubt, fear, whatever it is, building up to the fact that we want this, but for some reason we're not. So the first part is like, what skills are required to arrive at that set decision? Hey, I'm going to be rich, whatever it takes.
Again, that's a really interesting question, because it doesn't actually take any skill to arrive at that decision. It's just a thought form.
Mm-hmm.
The skill is on the opposite side. So a more useful question for you was, well, what skills do I need to develop in order to stop the negativity, in order to stop the self-talk, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Is that okay? Now, then you say, well, where does that self-talk actually come from? Well, the answer is actually involved, and it's a long one, and it involves the idea that you are not, you're not a single self, S-E-L-F. You're a multiple series of selves. Okay, so we're not one personality, we're a multiple. And we change our sense of self frequently throughout the day. And I'll just give you an example. It may not be in your case, Carlo, but if you just run with the idea for a minute. Okay, so I'm going to make you a married man with a couple of young kids that has a corporate job in an office somewhere. Okay, so you go to bed and you get up, and the first thing that you wake up as this person that's either got to wake the kids up, so that would be the dad. But if you wake up as the individual Carlo, well, then you might go into the bathroom and do some ablutions, and then quickly switch into dad. Okay, well, the person that shot into the bathroom and did the ablutions is not dad. It's some other, we'll just call it Carlo. But now dad is around because you've got some kids that need to, be fed and cleaned and, I don't know, ready for school. But you might have a partner there as well. Well, see, you're not dad when you're with your partner. There's a different self that kicks in. It's your partner self that interacts with your partner. That partner self may be domineering. It might be not so domineering. It might be a slave. It might be a whole bunch of things relative to your partner. Okay, but then it comes time for you to actually get into the motor car, and let's say you get onto the freeway. Well, Carlo, I don't know you, but you might actually be one of these people that enjoys road rage. So where does dad go? Where did partner go? Where did Carlo go? We've got this road rage in the car, navigating all of these people that are always doing the wrong things on the road. But then you get into your workstation. Well, the road rage self has gone somewhere. Dad is gone somewhere. Partner is not there. So now you're either professional title or you're something like that. So can you see that? And when let's say you're driving home, well, road rage is back again, road rage self. You go back, you pick up the scoots, well, road rage self just disappeared and dad self, came, et cetera, et cetera. So So persona or personality comes from the word persona, and persona means mask. So, let's say that you want to make love with your partner. Well, road rage self can't actually do that because they'd get they'd get kicked out of the bedroom. Does that make sense? And you can't do a lover self at the office unless you want to get kicked out of the office as well. So you can't actually cross paths. You can't cross boundaries, can you? Well, if you do, something terrible is going to happen. But you're so skilled at it, and you're not even conscious that your cells change automatically throughout the day according to the environment that you're in. So if you can understand that, then there's a subject called the psychology of the cells. And if you want to study up on that, you would read a book called Embracing Our Selves, S-E-L-V-E-S. And if you want to spend a little bit more money, you would buy the digital download of the recordings there. I don't think that it's probably $100 worth or something like that. It's a great subject. It's a head-busting subject. It takes your head a lot to get around it. So when I'm working with clients, I've actually got to know that all of these other selves. Now, when you're born, the first self that develops is called the vulnerable child. And when we're born, we need protection because we cannot fend for ourselves. So we have parents and they protect us, well, even into our teenage years. We're the only animal on planet Earth that has so much vulnerability. So the next cells that develop are the protector type cells. So we go through life, and depending on what experiences that we have, we can have these vulnerable cells still vulnerable, and these protector cells come to try and protect the vulnerability. And when that happens, all sorts of, domestic upset and all sorts of professional upset can basically happen, because now we're just in arguments because somebody's trying to protect their vulnerability and they don't realize what's going on. And then you can have these cells that are what they call the primary cells. And so in your case, you might be, the protector cells might be primary. But what about these other cells, these high achievement cells? Well, they've not got a Guernsey, because if you want to be a high achiever, you've got to make yourself vulnerable to learning. You've got to make yourself vulnerable to the unknown. You've got to make yourself vulnerable to what it is you don't know. Well, they're not going to let you go there because that's scary stuff. So they're going to put speeches into your head that says, don't go there, warning, 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 warning. Okay? Now, if you can do some work around that, these vulnerable cells, or these primary cells, are the protectors. The ones that you might tap into are what we call the unacknowledged or the undeveloped cells. They're still there, but they need energy. And the only way that they can get energy, if you're not nurturing them, is through drama. And if they can't get the energy through drama from somebody else, such as a fight or an argument, they're going to get it through conflict in your own head, because it's the only time they get a feed of energy is when they create drama within you, and that's where the conflict comes from. Now, I could go on a bit, but I've probably got a bit too far. But, we can continue this conversation. But get that book and read it, and that's a great place to start.
Hey, Paul.
Oh. Sorry. Go ahead, Carl.
Max. Hi, Max.
Yeah. Hey, Paul. I just actually, my question was related to selves, so I wanted to stay on the topic quick. In EMC, you talked about the 3 selves that develop for wealth would be the opportunity self, the enterprise self, and the entrepreneur self. I was just wondering if you could expand, because you go into pretty good detail about your job descriptions of each self in the content. I was just wondering if you could expand on it and maybe relate it to like your own experience of what those selves are like for you and what they do for you.
Okay, so So both my parents were poor as church mouses, and they were both profoundly deaf, so deaf mute people. So my first language is actually sign language. Okay, so both my parents were profoundly deaf, born in Tasmania, which means that my father could only ever do labour work. So he was a timber cutter, and then he was a sawmiller, and then he was a factory worker. Okay, because he didn't have school. He was born in 1920, no school for deaf people around there. My mum was born in 1926, no school for deaf people. And so my language, first language is sign language. So my first model of this thing called work is basically hard work, labor work. And so I'm really good at labor work, and I've always been really good and skilled at labor work. That's why I was dead flat broke at the age of 40, because I only knew labor work. Okay, exchange your time and money for, exchange your time and labor for money. And just what my dad did. Okay, so when I started to say, look, there must be another way, because I got to a point of enough's enough, dead flat broke at 40. Well, something's got to change. And the only thing I could think of changing was me, because I couldn't change the universe. I couldn't change the system I was born in. I could learn to get advantage out of the system, but I couldn't actually change it. So I said, well, okay, labor self, or I called it worker self, all worker self knows is how to work hard at something or at anything. Okay. You guys have got this worker self. If you work in a gym, if you do weights and things like that, that's worker self doing the hard work. Okay, and worker self will do that time and time and time again. You look at Keegan, some of the stuff that Keegan does. That's like hard work to get to that level. And somebody talked about 10D10. I guess it's got something to do with dense training and stuff like that. That's not easy work. So that the person that does it is not your entrepreneurial self. It's not your altruistic. It's not your lover self that's doing that. It's just worker self. So I knew that I had worker self. But what I didn't have, that's the only skill that worker self had. So then I thought, well, okay, worker self couldn't see an opportunity if it was in front of his nose. So the only thing that worker self can do is do a job and get paid for it. So I thought, okay, I've got to somehow tap into these other selves. And so I said, I want an opportunity self. I want to be able to smell an opportunity. I want to be able to see an opportunity. I want to be able to touch an opportunity. I want to be able to taste an opportunity when an opportunity comes. So that means my perception had to change of a few things. So I wrote out a job description for opportunity self. And the only work, quote unquote, that opportunity had to do was see or smell or taste or feel the opportunity. Nothing other than that. Didn't have to do any work other than see the opportunity. Because if I couldn't see it, then worker self couldn't do anything about it. So, okay, well, if worker self is not skilled at entrepreneurial things, it's just skilled at hard work. And if opportunity self could see entrepreneurial things, then who could actually realize the work of entrepreneurial things? Like, in other words, the skills of marketing, or the skills of copywriting, or the skills of trading, or the skills of investing, or the skills of house renovation, or blah, 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 anything to do with money, okay? So I had to develop an entrepreneurial self. So, okay, so entrepreneur self, well, sorry, not entrepreneur self, that came later, but enterprise self. Okay, if I could see the opportunity, how could I actually monetize it? So how do people monetize it? Who are they? What skills do they have? How do they think? How do they process information? So then I wrote out a job description of enterprise self. Now, how does how do entrepreneurs work? Well, firstly, you've got to go and look up a definition of entrepreneur. Who invented the coin? When did they invent it? And what did they mean? Because entrepreneur doesn't mean what most people think it means. Most people equate the word entrepreneur with risk. It actually is far from it. So if you go back and look at the original definition around about the 1850s by Jean-Baptiste Say, a French economist, and he was kind of trying to identify what was actually happening in this new type of business person. And without boring you too much about, the definition he came up with, basically, an entrepreneur takes something that already exists and finds a better way to deliver it, or finds a better way to add value to it, or a better way to leverage it. So if something already exists, there's got to be three things in place. A lot of customers who have a lot of need and who are buying and selling in between those 2 points. If that exists, I don't need to do anything because there's a business model that already exists, and the more lucrative that is, the better I want to be at it. So you can see somebody like Alex Hormozi. He started as a gym person and as a muscle person. I'm not degrading because I don't actually know Alex, but I'm just guessing because he's built like a brick, whatever. So he started off in that sort of muscle work, and then thought, there's opportunity here. There's opportunity here. And now look at him. He works with people that have got somewhere between $3 and $10 million and takes them to their last dollar. What a great, tag. Okay, so I developed Work Yourself. Now, Work Yourself, when Enterprise said to Work Yourself, hey, do this work of learning, Work Yourself just went and did it because that's all he knows. That hard work of, the task of hard work of learning. Opportunity self is, hey, can I smell an opportunity there? Can I monetize this? The opportunity self didn't have to understand how to monetize it. That was enterprise self's job. So does that make sense, Max?
Yeah, and the last bit you were talking about, there's my curiosity was about, because the pusher or hard worker type energy that the Embracing the Self talks about is like, it's almost like you don't want to shun that because it's still very valuable. So like what you're saying about giving him jobs almost makes a lot of sense.
I didn't have a pusher. I don't have a pusher.
Okay. So the hard worker, that's how they define it, right?
It's not the worker self.
Okay.
Okay. I have an ambitious self. I have a curiosity self. If I want to go for a gold medal at something, I'll go for it, but it's not the pusher doing it. It's the achiever in me that wants to achieve that outcome. It's the joy I get from actually doing the hard work, so that the gold medal is just like the sign. It's just like the it's the sign of achievement, isn't it? Like $1 million is $1 million. It's the same thing as getting a gold medal. For those people that don't know me, I won a gold medal in marathon canoeing. And as soon as I won the gold medal, I've never jumped back in a canoe. Took me a year to do it. But it was just something I wanted to do.
Hey, Paul, if I could jump in here, Eddie.
Hey, g'day, Eddie.
Hi. So something I was wondering about is, other than thinking yourself rich and doing the work, discovering what you really want, what was it in your life where your journey kind of really took off, and what are the things that after doing the work, and what got you really fired up and brought you to making that first million or making more money? Could you share a little bit about your journey, what it was that took you to another level?
Well, yeah, absolutely. There was I can almost tell you the moment, the time of day, if you like. But I was a potter, okay, and I was the first potter clay potter, makes clay pottery stuff on a potter's wheel. Okay, now when I say I was a potter, it's probably it wasn't exactly an ordinary potter. Okay, so I was a potter that was pretty keen on making social commentary through my work on a potter's wheel. So I worked in clay and stuff like that. Okay, and I really wanted to achieve the highest standard I possibly could at this thing called pottery. And the self-expression was just permission to keep going and doing it. After 13 years, starting from, not touching clay, and I entered it as a mature age student. I think I started potting when I was almost 30, I think. Probably a little bit earlier than that, maybe a few years. Okay. And then I was the first person ever to receive a PhD in pottery in Australia. Okay. So that means I achieved like a gold medal in that sort of environment. Now, if we call it the creative arts, we call it the arts. Anybody that works in the arts knows that it's very much a pecking order, very political, very hierarchical driven. And as a potter, I'm what they call a craft artist, which means I'm on the lowest rung. The fine artists are above that, the sculptors and the painters and the things of that nature. So there's a definite hierarchy. Within the industry itself, there's just so much bitchiness, so much clawing, so much cat fighting, so much dog eat dog, that sort of stuff. Well, I never bought into any of that. I just wanted to, head down, bum up. I wanted to be the best I could do. And that's the accolade. And that was 1990, I think. Yeah, anyway, somewhere around there. And then I went to work as a pottery tutor in a gold mining town in Western Australia called Kalgoorlie. Basically, for those overseas visitors, it's just a mining town in the middle of a desert, far removed from anywhere really. And I was invited in 1992 to do a major exhibition in the Festival of Perth in Perth, West Australia, which is the capital of West Australia, the capital town, in 1994. So I had 2 years to do the work, and basically I had 10 years worth of things and a highly high degree of skill to go with it. So basically I did the 2 years worth of work to produce 44 pieces for the exhibition. And now, as a craft artist, to be invited for the Festival of Perth, that was a really big deal because I'm the lowest of the row, lowest of the low, and the Festival of Perth is the highest of the high. So first, potter to be invited and stuff like that. And some very famous people opened up the show for me. And the show lasted 4 weeks, and I sold $4,500 worth of work, which then I had to give a third of that to the commission, a third of that to the taxman, and I was left with $1,500 in my hand. It didn't even cover the cost of the clay for the exhibition, yet alone wages or anything like that. So that's the lowest low point in my life, where you start reflecting on Thoreau's idea of most men live lives of quiet desperation and go to their grave with their song still in them. And that was me. That was me. I was so low that I almost felt that I had to beg for a living as a highly skilled, highly acclaimed, highly awarded potter. But I said, never again. Never again am I ever going to feel like that. So that's when I turned, well, okay, what does our society value? And what it values more than anything else is money. So fine. If I can learn to create artistic work through clay, I can learn to work, make money through my head. And that was the beginning of the journey. Does that make sense, Eddie?
Yeah, man. Thank you very much for sharing.
Somebody else can do it, I can do it. Because all it is a head thing, a head thing now. And then there's just the work that follows.
Yeah, it
Good
makes
question.
a lot of sense with the whole story of the selves. Definitely perfect, man. Thank you.
Yes, great question. Thank you.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for sharing your time and wisdom with us.
My pleasure.
I have like a short question related to pottery because I'm really intrigued by that, and then some
very
other
good.
questions I think will be more prudent. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
So how does pottery relate to like stonework and mixing concrete and mortar? Does it relate?
Right. Well, only if you want it to relate. But think about this. Think about this. See, I'm guessing, are you a concreter or a stonemason, or both?
Yeah, I do a lot of trade work. So I do like wood and metal and stone, etc.
Okay. So think about what it is that you do. Generally speaking, one of the first things that you do, especially if you're working with the clients, is that you have to somehow solve a client's problem. Okay. Now, you're the one with the skills in stone and wood and whatever else. The client may or may not be skilled in those things. And if there are, then you can have a level of conversation that will be different than if they don't. But the first thing that you've got to do, well, not the first thing, but, first thing you've got to do is go out and get a client. So that's marketing. And you either do that through word of mouth, or you carry around a big sign, or you drive around in a big truck, or say, hey, pick me, pick me, pick me. Or you're working for a building company that does that, and then they pick you. Okay, so one of those things. But firstly, you've got to get the client. And then you become a problem solver for the client. And then you've got a set of skills that can help, that can actually solve the problem. But firstly, you've got to know, well, what problem are you solving? Is it a visual feature? Is it a security thing? Is it a cheap job? Is it an expensive one? Is it a luxury thing? Is it a status thing? Is it, blah, 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 blah. Okay. And you do that naturally. You don't even think about it. You don't even realize that you've got those creative problem solving skills half the time. Now, half the time you might get a big job that you don't know actually how to do it, but then you go home and you start thinking about it. And then suddenly divine inspiration comes, either that or, some smoke blows in your face or something. And you say, oh, hey, presto, I've got it. I know how to do it. So you go back to the client and say, and now you've got to cost it. Okay. So you just maybe, well, it's got these units, and each unit is your time. So if you sell your time by hour, if you sell your time by, some other means, so it's going to take these many units. And then say, well, okay, you can go and get the materials, but if you get the wrong materials, I can't use them. So why don't you let me go and get the materials, or I'll order them for the shop and get them delivered or something like that. So there's the cost of materials, blah, 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 blah. And now a different part of you kicks over. It's not the creative self. It's actually the worker self. Now the worker self gets down and does this stuff in stone, and does this thing in concrete, and does this thing mixing. And at the end of that day, somebody pays you for it. Is that okay?
Yes.
Now, you have all of those creative skills and all of those making skills that I had as a potter. The only thing different between you and me is the medium that you're choosing. I was choosing to express myself in clay. I have to solve a problem. How the hell can I make that form? Okay, I've got to do trial and error until I work out how to do it, or somebody's got to come and teach me how to do it. Okay, and if somebody comes and teaches me how to do it, then I want to do it better than they do, so that I can teach somebody else. You've got that so far?
Love it.
Now, people ask me, do I ever miss clay? Now, if it's a short and I don't know the person, and I don't have to sort of give a rather meaningful answer, I just might just say yes or no. But if I'm going to give you my honest answer, which is a more meaningful answer here, I'm going to say, no, I've actually never missed it, because I never actually left it. All I did was change medium from clay to money. And use the same creative skills, the same problem-solving skills, the same how-to skills, and how I can create with money instead of clay, how I can fashion something with money instead of clay. You've got all of those skills. And so we are absolute brothers in that sense, except for one thought form. You're directing it to wood and concrete. I'm not saying stop doing that. I'm saying you've got everything that you need to be richer than I am, because you're probably more skilled.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that was the short question. What was the other one?
So thank you for that. I'm definitely going to take that as far as I can.
Good on you.
And how did you go about acquiring the wisdom you have now? And what's your best advice for us to gain similar wisdom?
Look, you're asking a Tasmanian the wrong question, because my absolute stock standard response is going to be good looks, charm, and personality.
So just make our thoughts related to those and then have them become physical reality when our emotions and thoughts align.
Step one, think it into existence first. There's no other step that you need to do. Just don't doubt yourself. If you doubt yourself, then it's not there. The light's off. As soon as you doubt yourself, as soon as you disbelieve, as soon as somebody says, oh, you'll never be able to do that, but are you? You're a bloody concreter. Well, what the hell would they know? In fact, I invited a whole lot of my pottery friends on the journey with me. They all just, you know, they're all sort of blasphemed and accused and all that sort of stuff, but they're all still doing what they're doing, and they're all still struggling. And I haven't struggled since. So it's the same steps. Think it into existence, emote it into existence, and now there's just the work. And so I didn't know how, so I started just reading books. And every time I read a book, I didn't leave the book in my head unactioned. Okay, I read a book because the only thing I knew about to start with was real estate. So I started reading, real estate books. So I didn't have any money because I was dead flat broke. So I bought the first house, but I borrowed, I think it was around about 10% of the house. I borrowed everything I could from banks. I mortgage, insurance, everything. I borrowed the deposit from family, friends, everything. So everything was borrowed, every single thing. I didn't have a cent to my name. And then I started reading books on how to actually renovate the house. So I renovated the house, and I'm not a tradie by any stretch of the imagination. I was a potter. And I was still a potter. You know, I was still a potter till 1999. I didn't stop being a potter when I was making this wealth. I was still a potter. But see, I wasn't a potter who wanted to be a millionaire. I was a millionaire already who just happened to do pottery. There's a huge shift in that thought form. So then I renovated my own house, got the bankers back 6 months later, and they doubled its revaluation. Now I could actually borrow from that revaluation. So I borrowed from the revaluation, paid back what I borrowed, and then I had some left over to put a deposit on a small flat, one-bedroom apartment. It took me 6 weeks to renovate that, and I profited $30,000. There was another one in the same unit. I did that, another 6 weeks. I profited $32,000. And I did that, about 25 times over before I started thinking a little bit more expansive in the share markets and trading and things of that nature. But it's the same process. There's a problem to be solved. There's creativity and there's skill. You've got the problem solving, you've got the creativity, you've got the skill. The only difference is where you're directing its energy, and you're directing its energy into the trades. And that's okay. But I said, well, those trades is never going to make me rich, so I have to direct it somewhere else. Same skill set.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Hey, Paul, this is Cam here in America. Want to thank you even for putting this on. It's early over here. Woke up and I had a couple questions for you. I'm an entrepreneur, and something you said earlier spoke to me about consumerism. Like 98% of the population are programmed to consume products.
There's an issue with the sound quality, Cam. I'm not sure if you got your finger on the microphone or something, but it's kind of cutting in and out.
I apologize. Can you hear me better?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, sorry about that. No, I said something you said earlier spoke to me about consumerism, where 98% of the population, is kind of designed to consume, goods and whatnot. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because that kind of spoke to me. And, you have to break out of that, to get to the, 1, 2, or 3% that is a producer versus consumer. That's my first.
Let's just, if you would allow me to inquire into a little bit about your background, especially, your money-making background. Okay. So I'm guessing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but somewhere along the line, you had parents, or maybe not, but somewhere along the line you ended up at school. Okay. So what was the aim of school in your memory, in your mind? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, I said it's funny you asked that. I really struggled with school my whole life. Not that in fact that I wasn't smart or whatever. I just found it very boring.
Yeah, I struggled with it too. I left really early. But what was the purpose of that schooling, do you think?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Okay. So let me ask you this question differently.
Sure.
When you first learned that you could actually make money, how were you taught to make it?
Primarily by working for somebody else.
Yeah, so get a job. Okay. Yep. So of all of the possible ways of making money, you were only ever actually educated into go out there and get a job, or go to university and get a better job. Would that be fair?
Fair.
Now, think back to your job that you do now, or the job that you do then, I don't care, or the job you've done in between, I don't care which one, okay? So the way that you actually earn the money was to give somebody your time and your energy in the form of your labor. And at the end of that, they gave you some money. Okay? You didn't know where that money came from, and you've never actually gone out there and created the money. The only thing that you know is how to actually do this thing called work.
Right.
Now, that may or may not have been rewarding work for you, but I'm guessing it wasn't that rewarding. And I'm guessing you wouldn't have done it if somebody wasn't paying you.
Right.
Okay. So then how did you feel good about the work that you did for the week?
It's necessary evil, I guess.
Well, yes, but how did you feel good about it? The only way you feel good about it is to go and spend the money, don't you?
Right. I see. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go and imbibe yourself, or go and spend it on food, or go and buy whatever. But the only way that you actually get some sense of reward is not from the activity itself. It's actually from spending the money.
Right.
So now you have been conditioned with two things. Okay. How to exchange your time and labor, and then how to get a reward. Now, you'll notice that none of those rewards that you did stuck around for a long time. They all disappeared at the end of the week.
Right.
Now you had to go back the next week to get the more money so that you could go out on Friday or Saturday, or words to that effect. What happened if you had no money left to spend at the end of the week? Could you still go and get rewarded for it?
No.
Of course you could, because you can go and do it on credit cards, can't you?
Right.
Yeah. So, look, I've run out of money. That's okay. I'll spend it on I'll put it on my credit card. So now you're taught a third thing. You're taught how to spend money you have yet to earn. And you're happy doing that and paying 18 or 20% interest on it. So now, how many years have you been doing that? Over and over and over and over again, approximately.
You talk about me personally, or?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I don't do that, so I don't have a mortgage. I have very little debt. So.
Well, that's okay.
But no, I mean,
you've got debt. So basically what you've learned is three things: earn, spend and borrow, earn, spend and borrow, earn, spend and borrow, earn, spend and borrow. Now, you might borrow a little, but that's okay. You've still got earn, spend and borrow.
Right.
Now, you were never given the opportunity to do it any other way, because social engineering and social conditioning doesn't want you to do it any other way. They want you to be obedient to that system, to be a servitude to that, and be predictable. In other words, earn, spend, and borrow, earn, spend, and borrow. So the only way that you actually learn to make money was actually through the exchange of your time and labor. And so if we can say, well, yep, that approximates my experience and it approximates, other people's experience, it doesn't have to always be like that. Because the other side of the equation doesn't actually do that. Like lots of people say, oh, instead of working for the man, I'll work for myself. Well, when you work for the man, you didn't actually have to find the money to pay you. But now you're working for yourself. Now you've got to do two things instead of one thing. You've got to find the money to pay you. And if you want a pay increase, you've got to talk to yourself. And nobody's ever trained you how to actually do the entrepreneurial and the enterprise stuff. So are you okay so far, Cam?
I'm good. Yeah.
Yeah. So can you see how that pattern sets in over time?
Mm-hmm.
And now we're expressions of that pattern. Now, once I realized, oh, hang on, I don't actually have to continue with that pattern. I can learn a different pattern. And now it's whether or not you're open for the learning opportunity. Did that answer your question?
Yes. The second part of my question.
You are who you are by design, not by your personal choice. Gotcha. You can become who you want to be by your personal choice, but probably mostly people have found themselves in this. They didn't design their way into this situation. So there's a design principle that's going on. Either you are the designer or somebody else is the designer. And generally speaking, it's the somebody else, because we live life reasonably unconsciously just doing what everybody else is doing.
Totally. Yeah. And the second part of my question goes, kind of what you're talking about, how to break out of that, and first looking at the different types of self. Can you talk a little bit more about, thinking yourself into riches? I guess, I was a little late joining the call, but I heard you talking about.
That's okay. Rather than take up time doing that, it's probably better to go back to the replay of that, because I actually gave a long answer on it. But I'll tell you how easy it is. Okay. So what's your favorite food?
Steak.
Okay. How quickly can you think yourself into a steak?
Pretty quick.
Okay. Now, how quickly can you think yourself into wealth?
Pretty quick.
Okay. What's the problem?
Got it.
Yeah. Once you think yourself into a steak, it suddenly appears. You don't have to go down to the paddock and butcher the thing. It's probably in your fridge or something like that. Or you might need to go down to the butcher or the supermarket or whatever. But as soon as you think it into existence, now there's just the work, isn't there? Of going and getting the steak. Well, modern economy makes it convenient for us. But then you've got to, unless you're eating it raw, you've got to then prepare it and cook it how you like it and stuff like that. It's actually the same process. There is no difference, except for the thought form that's going to interfere with the wealth one that doesn't interfere with the steak one.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Thank you for answering my question.
Yeah. If there's anything interfering with the wealth one, we need to talk.
Got it.
Okay, because that'll just be a longer process.
Hi, Paul.
Hey, g'day.
Thank you very much for all about what you're saying and your time.
My pleasure.
I have a question concerning the mortgage subject. So I was born and raised in France, and every people I know who are wealthy made it by mortgage, basically, in the real estates and the companies and everything. And I've watched your courses on the called Intro to Money and Wealth, and you say to go more into investing into gold and silver than going into a mortgage in real estates. My question is, if everybody has to live somewhere, so or you get a mortgage to live in a real estate, or you just rent a house or an apartment, isn't it better to have to get a mortgage, even if you lose money at the end because of interest and devaluation of the money? You still keep a little bit that just paying like 700 euros every month to someone and never see 1 cent back after.
Okay, so what you've done is you've put a lot of parameters around the way that you think about money. Okay. Now, the way that you think about money is the way that you've just described, which means that you can't think about it in any other way. Okay. Now, if you can only think about it in that way, there's nothing that I can say that is going to be meaningful for you unless we have so much more time together, because it's not just a quick answer. And if I tried to give you a quick answer, it would be a disservice to you.
Okay.
But one of the secrets is it's not what you think about, because we all think about money and shelter and security and independence and all of those things. The real difference is how we think about what we think about. So in order for you to have a perspective that would be different, I would need to teach you how to think about it differently so that my answer then could actually make sense. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give, after the call, I'm going to send a link through to Keegan of this lady on YouTube. And all she does is teach people how to think about this thing called money.
Okay.
And things like mortgages and things like this and things like interest rates and things like this and things like that. Now, if you digest what she is saying, which is how to think about the what is money, if you can digest that, you are going to be so shocked when you replay this recording and discover that you're thinking about it in the way that you just thought about it. Now, interesting word, mortgage, because the French created it. Do you know its literal meaning?
No.
Okay, so mort comes from death.
Yeah.
So mortuary, and gage comes from the French word that means pledge. So why would they use a name that describes the loan or your relationship to the loan as a pledge until death? I wonder why they would choose something like that.
We don't use this word in French, actually, mortgage.
Oh, you've certainly sent it all around the world.
Yeah.
What word do you use?
We just use like a credit. That's like a loan, basically. Yeah. Loan.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So, okay, I'm going to, after this call, I'm going to give, and then this is a big YouTube channel. There's lots and lots and lots and lots of videos there. But I would suggest you start with the one that says how to save $69,000 on your mortgage or something like that. Okay. But then, really, when you see her work, it's just your eyes will be popping out of your head on springs. But digest as much of that as you can,
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have her name?
A great background filler. And then next week, or next time we meet, we can progress that thought form.
Okay, cool.
But the answer to your question is it's not in what you're thinking about, it's how you're thinking about it. And the way that you're doing it is to position it to make it right for you. And then your argument will be, yes, but isn't it better to have something than nothing? Okay. In reality, if that worked, we'd all be rich. in reality, it does not work.
Mm.
But we think it works, and we're led to believe that it works. So the answer is how you're processing that information, not what you're processing.
Okay.
Good on you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you about this. Can't wait to see the video.
Hi, Paul.
Hey, g'day.
Hello. Thank you for the call.
My
I
pleasure.
have two questions. When I saw you talking on this call, another day I saw you talking, I realized people are looking for the landscape, like when you talk, people really use their mind, it's like they are reflecting a lot of what you say. And I want to ask why you use a live image of your place, of your view. It always make I don't know, make me think a lot. And the other question is, like, today I was judging a climbing competition, and I draw I don't know why, how can I say, King David star that is with two pyramids.
Yep.
One of the action, and the other like the self, like to be and to act. And it happens that this conversation, it's also the same, as the talk and the doing. So I understand you realize one day that you don't have to trade your force, like your work, for money, and you understand to develop your skill to make more your thoughts to trade for money. So how once you have the money, then what you value right now, because I'm a seeker of money because I don't have it. But once you have it, then I think the whole perspective and the whole value has another meaning.
It does for some people, but perhaps not for most people. Because, why does a billionaire want another $1 billion? Why does a trillionaire want another $1 trillion? When I was a kid, one of the questions I always wanted to answer, always wanted to ask, is why does a millionaire want another $1 million? Because as a kid, like $1 million was everything. So, we live in a society that wants growth and growth and growth and growth and growth and growth and growth. I'll just turn that. Hang on. Does that make sense? So more begets more, begets more, begets more. And, people think, well, more money is more power. So therefore I want more power, and,
Yes.
power corrupts.
But then you don't have more time.
Perhaps absolutely.
You have a limited
all of
time.
that sort of thing. But for me, there's a concept of enough. Okay. And so for me, I know what that enough is. And once I've got to that enough, the situation changes. So it changes in many different dynamics. And so, but there is this thing that is so much more valuable than this thing called money. And if I just look at me personally, I'm now at a stage in my life that I just want to give back. Now, the thing that gets me out of bed to do this thing is generally called money. I don't need it, but it's the piece of cheese. If you don't give it to me, you're going to give it to somebody else. So you may as well give it to me so I can do better things with it. But I don't need it. I'm not just a piece of cheese. But what drives me is sharing with you. And you might sort of have discovered that I never give a straight answer to anything. Because I value you so much. There is no straight answer, because the answer is, well, how are you thinking about what it is that you're thinking about? And to dissect that and to give you an example of how my poor little Tasmanian brain thinks about it is so much more enlightening than my opinion, if that makes sense. So the reason why I have that shot on my screen is I'm looking out the window now. That's what I see. That's live. Okay. I would rather look at that scenery to remind me of, this thing called lifestyle. I don't actually have to look at me. I do that every morning I shave. It's much more interesting out there. What's happening out there in real life is much, much better than what I look like. So that's why that, and I'm actually quite shy on top of that. So, but the process is, if you can think about this concept of enough, and the enough is to actually get you the lifestyle that you want, whatever that lifestyle is, and it'll be different amounts for different people. Now, the only thing is, hey, is that enough sustainable for you? Okay. And then once we've got those two things, you can do anything you like now. You just add your creativity, you turn left, you turn right, you turn up, you turn down. You can basically do anything. And I guess that's what, I'm led to believe that the umbrella that you're operating under is this thing called uncommon success. We're not talking about common success here. We're talking about the uncommon, the individuality. We're not talking about the herd, because the herd's never going to hear these responses. The herd is never going to ask the questions that you're actually asking. So this is a special group. And the more supportive you are of the uncommonness, people say, oh, that's just common sense. In fact, if you really think about that, common is something that we all hold together. And if we're talking about sense, it's the way that we think about something that we all hold together. Well, we don't want none of that, because the common sense is what the herd does. It's the sense that we have in common. We don't want that. We want the uncommon sense, which is what Keegan is supporting the development of. Does that make sense? And then that is contribution, because what benefit is it to me if I take it all to my grave? Nothing. So if I leave these thought forms for you and then you're the next generation's custodians of them, hey, good job. You get nothing but praise from me, nothing but encouragement. Go out there and spread the bloody gospel or the word or whatever you like.
Hi, Paul.
Hey, Chris.
Here in New York. Thanks a lot.
G'day.
Really appreciating everything that you're saying here. I'm a professional mimic that happens to be working in the fitness industry these days.
Is that what you're mimicking?
A bit. I've from being in New York, and growing up, raised in Queens, as the most culturally diverse county on the planet, I actually would walk from one culture to the next culture, through the next culture, going to a bus stop, to then go and observe the intermingling of different cultures and seeing the similarities of what made people tick, despite different languages or things like that. And in my professional careers, speaking to what you mentioned about the moment that you changed in relation to pottery, I found that I basically have naturally shifted or mimicked the person to be able to find that broken moment in their life so I could connect with them and then feel that they, similar to what we're doing here in Uncommon, that now their mind is ready to change because they've been able to kind of make peace and not feel so alone in their broken moments, or share that with me.
Yep.
Is it, as I'm looking to expand and help others more in the sales aspect of business, I'm going back and forth between the notion of, do I want to find other mimics and bring them into the fitness industry where so many other men are lacking that sales skill? Or is it better to invest the time in finding those broken moments in each of the fitness specialists so that they can shift their mindset to feel that they can accomplish something? And in this situation, it's sales.
Okay, so there's lots of different questions there, and there's lots of different levels to the response. Okay, so it depends. The answer depends on what lens you're going to look at the challenge through. Okay, so if I just put my hard, cold nose business person's lens on, I'm just going to look at the lens. I'm just going to look at the situation or the opportunity through the lens of money, nothing else. Okay, now, if I just look at it through the lens of money, who's going to be able to pay me more, the mimics or the business owners?
The business owners.
Okay. If I look at it through a social caring lens, who's more important to treat, the mimics or the business owners?
The business owners.
Okay. So we've got the hard, cold lens of money, and we've got sort of a social lens operating. So I don't care anything about the mimics anymore. Is that okay so far?
Yeah.
Because I still only got those two lenses. I might bring the mimics back if I find I need to save somebody. Lens. I need to rescue somebody. Lens. They're all possible lenses. Okay, now if you want me to bring in, I need to save somebody lens, who do I need to save? The mimics or the business owners?
I've been both. So it's difficult. I keep shifting my business.
That's okay.
Okay.
As
I find someone better to mimic.
Let me put this lens on. What do you want that you can't actually achieve right now by yourself? Doing what you're doing.
Partnerships.
What do you mean you can't achieve partnerships?
I have not been. I am looking for more partnerships to grow, and I have found that my skills kind of keep me more in the loner, or they work for me, but are not as easily. Yeah.
So just for the audience, and Chris, I hope you, I hope you're okay if I go a little bit deeper.
Please.
Might make your skin crawl, but this is not an attack, okay? But if the others on the call could just be an observer now of the conversation that we've just recently had, it's how Chris is thinking about what he's thinking about, that where the challenge is coming from. It's not actually what he's thinking about where the challenge is. He thinks it's about the challenge, but it's not. It's actually how he's thinking about it. So he thinks that the answer is in the partnership. Is that okay? Now, so Chris, what will a partnership give you that you can't actually get from being an individual? Or what do you think it will give you?
I I continue to grow when I'm given feedback from others.
That's okay.
Continues. It's like kind of an asteroid that keeps getting ping-ponged in different directions. So
yep.
It's exciting to be able to shift into their world, to find ways to connect with others.
Yep.
Because even though I'm a mimic, I still have an agenda. Yep. That I'm looking for those pieces of the opportunity to bring them back into where I'm trying to direct them.
Okay, so that was a good synopsis of your behavior, but it didn't answer the question. So the question was, what do you think a partnership will give you that you can't actually receive as an individual?
I guess it's companionship, or it's feeling alone, not wanting to be alone. If I was to take, whether a positive or negative.
So now we're getting down to the nitty gritty. Okay, we're getting down. We just. I'm not going to go too much further. Okay, I could go a lot further. We're not going to go too much further because I don't want this to be too much energy. When we get to know each other better, I might give you some more energy, but it's not comfortable, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate that you're actually being upfront and honest. Okay, so nowhere along the line have I heard this word money yet. Okay, so how are you feeling rewarded for what you're actually doing now? Or how do you think you'll feel rewarded if you have more partnerships that you're not getting as an individual?
Well, I guess it's really, if I was to, at that point, it would probably be the recognition of those other people to say that I have accomplished something, or to get the pat on the back from them, or those other recognitions. Because the money is actually not the issue at this point. Until recently, I had some level of contentment, but now that all of those things have broken away, I now am in a new place, and I haven't been able, maybe because my mimicking has never had me truly earning the skill, so I kind of need the next person to grow off of, if I will.
Okay. So this is, I'm just going to talk to the audience now because we're watching this live. So what Chris is actually saying is he's got an external locus of control, not an internal locus of control, to give it some jargon. Okay, so he needs external validation because he can't give himself that internal validation. And the way that he thinks that he might be able to proceed on that or get more of it is from other people. So Chris is going to position himself so that opens up at least the possibility. Okay, so back to you, Chris. On the scale of 1 to 10, 10 is very important. 1 is no importance whatsoever. How important is status to you?
It depends on who's judging me. There are some very high value people that I think so low of that their opinion of me means nothing. Mm-hmm. Even though others would say that it should. And it's probably really back to it is myself kind of putting to bed my demons of always wanting, probably my parents were not giving me the attention or things like that. Yeah. That I wasn't feeling the satisfaction or acknowledgement in the home, so I just went and got it on the street.
Yeah, yep, no, I'm with you on this. It's really interesting that what you say you crave is recognition and accolades and approval, and yet you say status. Oh, If I get it from the right person, it's okay. If I get it from the wrong person, it's not anything to me. So there's a conflict going on there in even who you actually get the status from, or the recognition from, or the accolades from, or the, you know, the ticks. And so we might say that, a major concern for you is to position for positive regard. And if I was to get my X-ray glasses on, I might say that what you really want is unconditional positive regard. And you actually can't get it. Because the positive regard that people will give you is actually conditional on you being who they want you to be. Because if they can give it to you, they can take it away. And that's what happens all the time. And you just told me a little bit about your family history. You couldn't get it from them. So there are these unresolved issues that are actually at the foundation of driving your behavior. Now, if we just end that sort of process there, we can have a chat about it, but I won't inquire any further. If we bring that back to the question, is it better to work, or is it more fruitful, or I forget exactly how you language it, but is it partnership or individual? Is it business owners or is it mimics? Okay, so we've got to be really clear about what it is that you're actually seeking. And if it's approval, then it may well be neither of those two groups. But if you actually say, well, look, if I was getting more income, I could actually do something better with that income than I'm currently done, or I'm moving on borrowed time because I've got a stack of income, but there's a drain on it, so to speak. Then we know better how to actually, offer you some suggestions. But and the other thing too, we've got to think about language. When I hear the word partnership, so I'm in Australia and I hear the word partnership, the partnership in my terms actually means a business relationship between people. Okay, it's a legal thing. It's like, it's a contract. Now, what happens in Australia if you enter a partnership, and this has happened to me, okay, so, and to give you the short story, I went out in a partnership and I made $1 million, and the other side of the partner, they were supposed to do activity X, Y, and Z, but they never did activity X, Y, and Z. Okay, but I need to give them half of that $1 million because we're in a partnership. But they didn't do X, Y, and Z. So now I want out of the partnership. The only way I can get out of the partnership is to buy the other half out. Guess who got the other $50,000 or the other $500,000 or whatever it was? Okay, so I ended up with zero. So in Australia, partnership means a legal thing. I'm guessing that that's not exactly what you're talking about.
Well,
or if it is, it is.
The complex answer to me is that my brain broke early, and the easiest way I wrapped my head around it was said, I'm King Arthur, but the Knights of the Round Table are all up here, and I'm going to pull on each one to save the day, right? To be the knight in shining armor, and sometimes
yes, and that's how you will get approval. Yeah.
Well, some with approval. Yeah.
What you're talking about is I'm going to rescue somebody.
Right.
I'm going to save the day.
When a weak personality inside starts whining too much about not having the approval, the other, the bulldog comes in and says, all right, you shut up, get in the corner, get back to work.
Yep. And that's a classic psychology of the cells scenario. And the way that you put it is brilliant. I've got these, King Arthur, and I've got the Knights of the Round Table all spinning around trying to get their tuppence in, or trying to get their pennies worth in. But the answer to your question, it really does depend on what lens do you want to look at it through. If I look at it through a cold, hard business lens, so the end result of that is money, it's who I can make the most money from, and then I'll develop those skills. Now, if the mimics are reasonably not flush with money, if they can't afford my ideas and they can't afford me, I'm not going to work with them. Okay, I'm going to work with the business owners who I can take. Well, look at Alex Hormozy. He's made a huge success out of taking, gym-related business owners through processes so they can double, triple, quadruple, 10x their returns. So the answer really depends on what lens you want to look at it through.
Yeah, typically I shift my lens to who I'm sitting across from.
I'm getting a strong sense of that, because the most important thing is approval, which is status, which is importance, which is acknowledgement. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. If you know what the drivers are, then now can we turn that into an entrepreneurial enterprise sense? And the answer is yes. Because the beauty industry wouldn't work if people didn't look for approval. The weight loss industry wouldn't work if people didn't want to look for approval. The gym industry wouldn't work if people weren't positioning for approval.
Yeah, the approval has been money. And that's the way that I said I have been approved, was because they purchased or because of the successes.
Yep.
And I'm probably, I'm using terms because since recently giving up alcohol, the recognition of who were friends and who were drinking buddies, true friends to drinking buddies, and kind of changes the way I've looked at things. So I feel like partnerships might have some of those rules to protect myself, that if the partnership isn't working, there are appropriate exit measures on both sides, or that it might give me a little bit of comfort.
Partnerships don't work. It's individuals who work or not work. Okay, so it takes two to tango. You can dance with somebody and you find out they're a tree. They can't actually move. Now, let's just leave it there, because there's a lot of depth in there that we need to unpack. But I want to just check one thing. What in your frame of reference is a mimic?
Well, I guess it's basically turning my empathy level up to absorb all the emotional and physical and as much energy as I can that I'm observing and that I'm sensing and that I'm feeling. Also, compared with everybody else that I've had these interactions with, so that I can actually appear to the person that's speaking to that they're speaking to themselves.
Oh, okay. So it would be something like a shapeshifter.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Because mimic to me is something completely different. So I'm glad I checked in.
Okay.
Good on you. No, hey, look, thank you, Chris, for just being so open and so honest. And I hope the audience just got a little, insight into, it's your solutions are always found in questions. They're never found in statements. And so, the more questions that you can ask, and the more you can, paraphrase and things like that, and throw it back as a question: is it this or is it this, and to what degree, and on the scale of this and the scale of that, we can, Chris is opening up. And he's opening up to a complete bloody stranger. So I just really want to acknowledge you and thank you. But let's continue this conversation, okay? I've got to go soon because I've got another call on, but is there any last questions that we need to get hold of?
Hi, Paul. It's right, I can ask
Alex.
a question. Hi, pleasure to meet you. Thank you. Thank you for your time. So one thing I was really interested in is, one of the kind of impetuses for positive change is putting ourselves in an environment, in the right environment, or around people who are in a position we want to be in. And obviously, you put yourself in circles of, the richest people in the world, and became that yourself. And I was wondering, how do you kind of get into those clubs? And how do you kind of make that happen for you?
Oh, it's really easy. You just pay them a heap load of money. Yeah. And after paying them a heap load of money, I decided I didn't really want to belong to that club. It wasn't really my cup of tea, and it wasn't really how I wanted to do business, and it wasn't really, it just burnt my soul.
Interesting. Was there utility in it for you, or would you say like not really actually?
Well, no, great learning. I suddenly discovered what I don't want to be. Great learning. I'd do that every day of the week, but I wouldn't do it anymore because I've discovered it. But yeah, no, there was nothing. I didn't take away a negative from it, but my golly gosh, did I learn? You betcha. And I have a rule. Okay, it's one of the first wealth rules I ever developed, and that is the free plus $1 rule. Okay, and so what that means is it didn't matter how much I actually paid to be, let's say, in that membership or in that club. Okay, my job was to get $1 more, to earn $1 more through something that I learned than it actually cost me to learn it. Now, if you only ever keep that one rule, you're going to be wealthy and financially free for the rest of your life. If you only ever just keep that one rule, 3 plus 1. And I'll tell you how it started, because I was like dead flat broke as a potter. But one of the part-time jobs I had was demolishing houses, which means that I could actually take the timbers that they couldn't then on sell. And most timbers, it's hardwood timber framing sort of thing. And so, they couldn't sell the twisted and the bent ones. And so part of renovating the house was to actually build a shed out the back, like a garage, a car garage. And so I took all of the bent timbers and anything that I could get for free, windows and stuff like that. But I didn't actually have the tools. And so it got down to my last $150. And so I said to my wife, look, we either spend this on food or actually I buy a planer, a wood planer. So it was a Makita planer and it cost $75. So, well, I couldn't build the shed if I didn't have the planer. But if I spent the planer, if I bought the planer, then we only had half the amount of money. So what I ended up doing was I actually bought the planer to do the job, but I actually made a rule. Now I've got to go out and make that planer earn $75 plus 1. Now the planer was free because now the $75 was back in the kitty, and plus 1, now I've got a return on investment. And the way that I did that is I lived in the neighborhood and I just went around door to door, knocking on all the doors and saying, look, I held up my planer, said, look, if you've got a sticky door or sticky windows and they're wooden, I'll actually plane a few mil off and then make them slide up and down, or I'll make them open and close without sticking. And I charged just $5 a job. Now, I actually made back more than $75. So, I can't remember how much, but it was 1,000% return on the planer, on the $75. And I've stuck to that rule ever since. Okay, I'll leave you with those thoughts and hopefully we connect at some point in the future. And I'll send Keegan that link. I've got to get onto another call now, so it might be tomorrow morning before I actually send it.
Gents, if you want to stay on for a brief debrief, you're welcome to as well. If you've got to shoot, it's been a long one. So thank you very much, Paul. It was a powerful restart, and appreciate the share of wisdom, and great to see the energy here.
Pleasure, and I'll see you again. Bye.
Bye. Who wants to share some thoughts there, take homes? What's stuck? How's it feeling? It's quite.
So I hopped on at the end here, guys, but just a little bit that he dropped was very knowledgeable. So insightful. He dug really deep, asked amazing questions. Chris, your content and what you gave out, your reflection on yourself, I felt that energy very much. It was very deep. I think a lot of us feel the imposter syndrome and the chameleon, trying to be a chameleon to connect with other people. yeah, I just wanted to say I'm glad that it's been a long day for me, but I'm glad that I hopped on at 2:00 and still made it because it was amazing. Thank you guys.
Thanks for sharing, Morgan. Yeah, there are a lot of challenging concepts. And Paul, when you look, I always look at the story of where someone comes from, right? Paul came from a family of 2 deaf mute parents. And so he was always an outsider. And he has this outsider mentality to everything that he shares. And he's built a fantastic life for himself, and he's extremely self-reliant. My experience has always been around teams. My father coached teams, and I was on teams from a young age, and I'm very much a team-based person, and we've had very different experiences of life. It feels as though Paul's never been on a team. And so we're wired differently, for better or worse. There's elements of myself that I change and that I remodel, and there's others that I don't aim to change or remodel. In my experience, like, teams can be a really, really powerful thing. And the game and the question is, how do you create a team environment that isn't homogenizing? And that really is the goal with Uncommon Success, is that you choose when it is that you're going to work. You choose what it is that you're going to work on, but you have a team around you that expects excellence from you, because Paul's been able to cultivate excellence in himself for a long time without seemingly having great teams. Like, he did the Tony Robbins stuff, and he's done Harry Dent, like trading, education, and he invested a lot in educating himself. It probably did help him level up in different ways. Even, he shares his reflections on that. But yeah, that's really the journey that we're on here, is like, how do we help each other? And how do we create that strong winning environment? Because yeah, I don't win on my own. And Paul actually kind of did win on his own. He got his PhD and he did those things like on his own. But my experience is, when I'm on my own, I turn to shit. So what I've created here is what I need, and it's not going to be what everyone needs, but it's something special, that for those who do want it. And this is the game. So, I would love to hear more thoughts from you guys. What kind of stuck. There's a bunch of memes and key ideas there that he drops that you'll hear repeated, or you might have already heard through the EMC content. Also, the live element adds something special as well.
One of the big ones for me is, really early on in the call, we were talking about this idea of thinking into wealth, thinking into abundance. And I like to think of this as the abundance mindset, or rather the frame of abundance. It took me engaging with this community for over a year to fully step into that space where I can see it clearly. Like, I look ahead and I feel wealthy already, and it exists in the mind. And now that all it's left to do is to create the work, to work on the skills and start getting the results from that. But for anyone who maybe is newer to Uncommon Success, stick with it. Some of these things take a lot of time to change. Some of the memes and the mind, blown conversations, they take time to sink in. Stick in and continue having the conversations, continue showing up, play the game. It really does change your life, because this conversation with Paul is radically different for me than it was 6 months ago, than it was 12 months ago.
That was really good. Well put. I have like 14 pages of notes from this conversation. I have to watch it over again, and there's just a ton of information. And I appreciate all the really considerate questions from everyone. It was a really good session.
I just want to point out to you guys, I feel that every conversation, you should start with your ribs open and ready to get as deep as you can. That was not difficult for me, because that's the place of where I want to operate, the discussions I want to be having. Because, I guess maybe in my original work in the fitness industry, I only had a half hour to sell personal training, and that included a workout and some sort of connection, and then a pricing program and be successful. So I don't have the time for 5 surface area questions, I'm gonna boom, get right in there. And the easiest way actually to get somebody to open up is to share something deeper than they would be expecting to get, so that you're right on the real level. It's not that, you know, superficial kind of bullshit of chit chat at a cocktail party. It's if I'm at a cocktail party, I wind up getting into a conversation that like I'm missing half of the ceremony because me and that person are actually in some sort of alternate universe of where we just found ourselves. And clearly words matter, because where I use the term mimic had a different connotation across a culture than a shapeshifter, which I guess in hindsight, a mimic is more of just a mirror back, as opposed to the shapeshifter is that I'm compiling it all to use those tools and deploy them behind the scenes in a seamless way to connect with who I'm working with, or trying to work with. And I guess the last thing on imposter syndrome, that should only happen is if you're not delivering, and not delivering because of your own fault, not circumstances. Shit goes wrong, things don't work out, but as long as the intentions are there and your efforts and focus on delivering it, there is no, that imposter side of things goes away. You know, that's my 4:30 a.m. 2 cents.
Good stuff, boss. Good stuff.
One thing I was thinking from as well, with respect to the consciousness conversation at the beginning, and I think people touched on this as well, this idea of introspection and really kind of getting deep into like what our fears are, what our barriers are, what our desires are. I don't know if people have advice about how to like do a deep dive in that. I think, you know, doing TFE, I started to ask myself those questions, but I feel like there's still a vast amounts of undiscovered territory. And yeah, how do people do that?
I believe I have something that would help with that, because one of the big points that resonated with me was how he spoke about vulnerability and then associating that with childhood, in the sense of when we're children, we're very vulnerable. And then that had me thinking, well, what are children, what are they fantastic at? They're fantastic at learning and growing, but how do they do that? They're constantly expressing themselves to the fullest, which that social engineering causes us to be scared of expressing ourselves for fear of being wrong or fear of being hurt or fear of not fitting in. That's me specifically what I've experienced, and I imagine others have too. And so the key concept I think we can take from it is that if we can embrace that vulnerability and express ourselves and try new things and be okay with being wrong, or even reversing it. And like I read, some people have been telling me about a book by Zig Ziglar called like Go for No, and I think Chris mentioned it too in selling. It's like when we express ourselves and get that feedback, if we can reframe and change the way we think about it, as Paul was saying, to instead of, oh, I did bad or I did wrong, no, I learned from that, I expressed myself and I'm getting feedback that's going to help me grow even more. I think that's like a key takeaway for me, because when we openly express our vulnerabilities, that's how we can grow from them instead of them being an inhibitor towards our growth. Is that kind of what you're saying, Alex?
Yeah, to an extent, I think. Maybe it's like a muscle as well. Like maybe just it's actually like you're saying, like having time set aside to dwell on these questions, you get better at finding answers as well. Yeah.
Yeah, Alex. Just to piggyback off what Daniel said too. I also agree. Like this stuff is kind of just clicking for me as well, and I've been in Uncommon since it started, and listened to Paul for over 2 years. So, and that's been my journey. Is that I was stuck in so many different ways, and fears and beliefs and things like that. And I'm still, working through all of them. But the selves concept has been the most powerful thing for me. And just realizing that each self is basically, from my understanding, protecting a vulnerable part of you that carries the belief, from my experience, from some kind of past experience or some kind of past trauma or fear. And that's what Paul talks about, these unresolved issues. And so understanding yourselves, embracing yourselves, basically what Garrett was saying.
Yeah.
So learning to actually basically seek curiosity about what yourselves are protecting is kind of the trailhead that you can use to then discover what the deeper issues are. And then from there, it's also embracing the vulnerable side of you as well, and learning to integrate that energy into, higher evolved, more purposeful energies.
So kind of to back off of what Max was saying, Alex, I'm coming in from recovery from drugs, and there was a lot of unresolved traumas from when I was really young, and that played into a lot of my decisions going into my life later on, from selling drugs to whatever else, so that was my money-making scheme, but I didn't understand the unresolved stuff, and so I couldn't really continue to build any growth off of that. I kept halting myself up, and we got to continue to dive into, like the way I explain it is connecting the dots to draw the picture, right? When we go back into the unresolved trauma, we can connect one dot to the next dot and be like, oh, that's why I am the way I am, and then we can really find that growth, and then we can start watering that seed, or the picture, whatever you want to call it, right? Two different metaphors there that I'm drawing, but you get the picture. But now that I'm a year into Uncom, all of this stuff is vibing. It's all making more sense. I'm really engaging and really trying to expand my own mind. And so I just wanted to back off of what Max was saying about the traumas and digging deep into them and understanding it.
Yeah.
One thing on that, I support Morgan entirely and in how he's expressing it, because I've experienced a lot of the same things. It may be useful for some people to disregard some of that strategy. So there are different strategies that are going to work differently for different people. Not everyone needs to spend a lot of time reflecting or thinking about the past. Some people, they work better moving forward. They work better finding people who are ahead of them and connecting with those people. I think, it's probably all of the above for everyone.
Definitely is. Yeah, for sure. Like Keegan, I draw so much inspiration from that, right? And so it's that's the motivation. That's who I want to be like. That's my future is mentoring the youth. So yes, you're totally right. But
Do we have resources because it sounds like that kind of relates potentially to the genius type, like if introspection would be more beneficial for them based on potentially that genius type, or is that something that's accurate? And if so, do we have a resource for determining that so we can utilize that in our growth?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It could well be. I'm sure Charles would have some thoughts around that, and it's a good one to bring up on the next conversations with Paul as well. Some are definitely more past focused and others are more future focused. Generally, Paul and Bob Proctor, who is another big influence on me, focus on the future. They do say that there's value in the past, and there are definitely systems that are about that past excavation. My focus has always been on the future and living what I want to live each day. And I found that that's displaced, using a lot of alcohol and porn and all that stuff has been displaced by I've got better things to do. That's how it's worked for me, is continually focus on what it is that I want to do, where I want to put my time and energy. And yeah, for me, that's worked well, but I know there are other methods. And this is a question that's been asked to Paul many times. He generally focuses on what you want. Bob Proctor also uses the metaphor of you don't bring light into the room by cursing the darkness. That's what I generally focus on as well. That's why we don't tend to focus on overcoming addiction and things like that. It started to come up a bit more, and I'm always open to testing ideas. But from my experience, I've had hundreds of guys overcome addictions without ever speaking about them. They tell us a year later, oh yeah, I used to be addicted to this when I started. And they simply found something more powerful. Like Jordan Peterson talks about, alcohol is a hell of a drug. If you want to get past alcohol, you need to have something better than alcohol to do. And to me, this is all better than alcohol. So I'd rather do this than get drunk. And I love that there's a group of other men that want to build businesses and train rather than get drunk. And the Discipline Action Brotherhood gives us a chance to connect more often and more deeply. But yeah, there isn't one method. So
no, Keegan, I agree with you. Being with you guys has made me really focus on what the future holds for me. There's the club that we're a part of, but being with you guys, the DAB and the TFE, that takes my mind off of all of it, right? I'm really, really ready for the future, and I'm really focused on expanding myself in that way. And you highlighted some stuff for me. I appreciate that, man.
It's good to hear like what you've overcome, and there's many who've overcome strong stuff to get to where they are. It is testimony to the ability to change, and it gives us faith that others can change as well. Who we've each got our own journey, but inviting others to experience something else. Maybe they've never been invited to a different philosophy of life. A lot of people have never met anyone who wants to have this kind of conversation. It's strange, but true.
Another skill set, guys, that I really haven't shared or focused on too much, because a lot of this connection has been going back and forth, and it's really important, I think, at this point, for us all to feel that we have other people in our world that we listen to. But I'm going to bring this back to money, because that's really why I'm up in the middle of the night for 2.5 hours. Is really money at the end of the day. But I also have been preparing income taxes for the last, my father is a financial planner and income tax preparer. And he's actually, I think he might have been the last sole operated brokerage house in New York for a number of years. But at the end of the day, sitting in front of 500 different people and seeing what the sum total of their finances were for the year, and those that made a bunch of money and were, living check to check, and those that were making minimal, but they were very content and on a path towards success, those seeing the inevitability of certain paths, it's you got to know when it's time to hit the eject button, or just say enough talk, action needs to happen. It really, it's okay. You can still talk in your head while you're laboring away or as things come back in, but you must bring it back to what is going to, if you love this, you have to get paid to continue doing what you love. Or if your life is in ruin, you're going to be, if you're not moving forward and unhappy, you're going to be stuck doing something else that is not meaningful. So, it's good to get into all of these places, but for us, we want to be successful. So take it, mold it, and then use it, and go forward. Yeah, if anybody wants to talk further about kind of layering the lenses, I don't know if Paul goes into that, of where, okay, instead of just looking through this lens of like maybe like a technician or a specialist or a generalist, it might need a hybrid lens, or a multiple lenses, or a different perspective. So make sure that these things are leading towards that direction of turning it into the wealth and the income and wealth, so you can do it.
Yeah, 100%. That's Paul got the money, and then he's got this beautiful farm down in the south of Tasmania, and he's helped a lot of others to understand finances differently. And ultimately, that is one of the key outcomes. You have to get to a point with money where it's not an issue, and then you can continue to pursue your passions and interests. I think that's a good place to finish on, because there are a lot of deep rabbit holes and ways you can go with this, and it's fun. It's good to explore, but bring it back to mission and achieving something, creating something. Ultimately, Paul is creating something beautiful with all the lectures that he's built and the presentations that he gives, and you have access to a lot of that. The goal is for you to become that to others, be that leader, embody the things that you like from what Paul does or what I do or whoever you're looking up to. Embody that yourself and build something beautiful. Like, that's ultimately what we're here for in Uncommon Success, is to build something beautiful. And this should be fuel for it, and the introspection is valuable in that process. But I would encourage you to keep building, and that's the invitation to connect in on the Discipline Action Brotherhood. I just put the link up again there today, but that's a clear metric of, are you putting some time in each day to move forward? It's not the only way to do it. You can work without being on there. But what I've found is 95% of men who want something different in their life are not consistently putting time into that future reality that they have a picture of, and therefore they're in conflict with it, between the actions and the desires. So yeah, I love that we get to have this conversation. I love that we get to back it up, all the energy and excitement that comes from this, of like, okay, spend an hour today mapping that out, building the next step, and that inspiration is going to continue to be there. And the brotherhood that goes with it, it's a cumulative thing that we're just beginning, but it's I'm very much looking forward to seeing these seeds grow and unfold. Thank you everyone for jumping in. Thanks Pete as well, driving away there. Alex, good to see you. And let's connect again very soon. Good to see you on as well, Ian.
We'll check you later, Keegan. I appreciate you guys.
Champion. Yeah, get some rest, those who are in North America. If you listen to the recording and you enjoyed it, please feel free to share something in the Money Mentor channel on Telegram or wherever you feel most appropriate. Speak soon.
Thank you. Great discussions. Yeah, cheers. Thank you.
See you, Alex.
Cheers, guys.